Hey guys, Sure Shot Midget here. So this is a friend's gun. It is my brother's best friend's gun, to be more specific. This is a BAMF M4. So if I'm not mistaken, I think the barrel length on this is it 16 inches? I think this is 16 inches. I don't think this is a 14 and a half. I believe it's 16. So this is like a mid-length gun, you would call it, whereas typically like a carbine is 14 and a half. This might be 14 and a half. I'm pretty sure that's 16 though, just by kind of looking at it. Now, this was purchased from an old friend of mine, got it from a mystery box. I was hanging out with him for the first time in years, and he had gotten this from a mystery box, and I told him a friend of mine was looking for a receiver and a base gun, if you will, to put his V12 that he bought for me. So this is a brand new Falcon V12 HPA engine that I purchased, and I threw in here for my friend. My friend obviously bought it for me. And yeah, so I'll just start from the back, go to the front. So we just have a basic crane stock, metal buffer tube, standard charging handle. It did have a functional bolt lock, but I don't think it's working now because it's not mounted to the receiver or the gearbox, because it's a V12. It changes the gearbox. There is an ambidextrous magazine catch, which is actually really cool. That's a very nice feature in my opinion. Selector switch is a retro arms because the original one was all funky. I'll get into that a little bit later. The upper receiver is monolithic with a back sight that flips down and a front sight that also flips down. If you push the button, it interfaces with the rail, which is really cool. And there's a fake gas block, and like I said, I think this is a 16-inch barrel. The inner barrel is brass. The hop-up unit is metal, but it's a standard type. It's not a rotary. You can see that there. It's a standard type hop-up. It actually shoots really good though. So I'm going to estimate it shoots close to 250 feet, and that is a completely stock hop-up unit. Now it is brand new, so it needs some break-in. I shot about 500, 600 BBs through the gun so far, and I did notice a couple of the BBs at the first, with a fully loaded mid-cap, the first couple BBs kind of sound a little bit different, but when I put it through the chrono, it didn't seem to be shooting any lower FPS. It's kind of weird. It just had a different noise to it. But it didn't shoot lower FPS, and that's probably a bucking break-in, so that will break in over time. I say typical bucking break-in is maybe a couple thousand rounds, 2,000-3,000 rounds, before your gun it actually settles. And then maybe 4 years down the line, the bucking starts to dry out, so you may want to change it. Over time, buckings are kind of one of those parts that you should change after 4 or 5 years. But this one, again, is brand new. It just needs a couple thousand rounds of break-in, which is typical. Now, the receiver is metal. It does have a couple logos on there. The rail system is metal. It's a quad rail. I think it's like similar to dare I say, like a URX, like just quad rail. It reminds me of the SR25, which I do have an SR25. It's longer, uses the 7.62 mags, but this just reminds me of that. In terms of the internals, it does have a red low-flow poppet. It has a stock nozzle that I bored out, so I took a drill and actually bored it out to the diameter close to a red nozzle. So effectively, it has a red nozzle with the low-flow poppet, and I believe, now I did this like 5-6 months ago. This gun's been sitting around. I'll explain the issue that I had with it. I think there's a S2 banjo. I think there's an S2 banjo in here. You know, there is. There is. I'm like 99% sure there's an S2 banjo in here. Those are the two upgrades I recommend for the V12. Otherwise, it is a major air hog. It just eats through air like none other. If you have the S2 banjo and the low flow red poppet, and then you bore the nozzle out, then you can run lower PSI, and it's pretty similar to a fusion engine efficiency. Now, the regulator I had at about 85 PSI. It shows a little bit above, and it was shooting a little hot, so it was shooting about 1.6 joules with 0.3s, which most fields will only allow 1.5, maybe 1.55. Some do not compensate for joule creep, so they will allow you know, 400 with a 0.2, which will equate to like 1.7 with a 0.3. So it just depends on where he goes, but of course HPA is adjustable and you can change it around. Right now he is living in Indiana, but every now he comes back here to the good old OH, and he plays here. In fact, I don't know that he's ever played in Indiana without me or my brother. I traveled there back years and years ago, and we played like twice at a field in Indiana. But it's been a long time since he's played there. He's come back here once or twice and played in the past couple years. So typically he would play here. He actually went and played in Texas because some of our friends and my brother lives down there. So he might be playing down there. But I'm just going to dry fire it here real quick. So the safety does work, semi-auto. And of course you can spam the trigger. I did shorten the trigger pull. So as fast as you can pull the trigger, it'll fire. Now, the reason why I mentioned that all this is because it does not work on full auto. And that is due to the receiver. It is absolutely due to the receiver. Now, the V12, if you know anything about them, they come with two different selector plates. One for G&G, because G&G is a little finicky, and then regular. I tried both, and nothing works. So when you flip to full auto, it actually bends the selector plate. Like the angle of it, it's almost like the actual hole for the selector switch needs to be a little bit higher because it's just not getting a good angle. When I'm actually flipping to full auto, it's bending the back of the selector plate up instead of pushing it back, like rolling it back. So it's going to be a semi-auto only gun. Now, there might be a field that allows 5.56 to be DMR. Some fields do allow that. Some only, like milsim type fields, oh, I'm so realistic, you know, with the 7.62, like a SR25. They allow those to be semi-locked and like 450 FPS or higher, and the equivalents, you know, with the jewel rating. Some fields may allow that. So he might be able to go and shoot 450 with a 0.2 or 430 with jewel creep included. So like 1.85, 1.9 is some of the fields is what they allow for HPA, which is like 430 FPS with a 0.2. So they might allow that, and it is semi-locked, so he might be able to up his regulator and shoot semi-auto because it is semi-auto only, and just have a minimum engagement distance of some fields 50, some 75 for a gun shooting this FPS. But otherwise, he can shoot like everybody else on the field. Again, I was at about 85 PSI is what I would recommend. It is what it is. It's stuck to semi-auto. Most fields only allow semi-auto anyways. Most of you guys know how that is. Most fields are like wannabe milsims, and even on open plays, they only allow semi-auto, which is just whack, if you ask me. But I'm not going to get in a rant on that. So semi-auto is typically only allowed anyways. 7-year-old G&P mid-cap and a 6 or 7-year-old VFC mid-cap with 0.3s. Let's try the VFC first. All right, now let's try the G&P. I have it overhopped just a little bit. Not a whole lot. I might need to turn it down a little bit though. And of course that's semi-auto. Spamming it real good. Let's put it through the chrono real quick. These are 0.3s. I'll read it off to you because it's probably hard to see. 338, 337, 336, 339, 336. Very consistent. That's with 0.3s. 1.58, so maybe a little bit too high. Some fields would allow that. Some only allow 1.5, so it would have to be turned down a little bit. This thing is definitely getting over 200 feet range. I'd say 250 feet. It's a little bit dark out here. Hopefully you can see the BBs, but I do have it overhot. Let me turn it down just a hair because the bucking is breaking in. Everything's brand new on the hop up. It's a little bit better.